today we're going to be making a little fall landscape because this is the first week of autumn and I'm super into autumn and I think it's going to be a really fun painting. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need your watercolor paint, watercolor paper, and then I am using two brushes. I'm using a small brush. This is a number 2, and then this one is a 10, and they're both round. So you're going to need water as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my paper. And I'm not taping down my paper today, and I'm going to show you another method of how to make it so that your paper doesn't bend. So the reason why your paper bends is because you're only wetting the top surface, so one side. And so you can see here that it is starting to bow. It's not perfectly straight. And that's because what's happening is I'm saturating the top half and the bottom half is dry, which means that they are drying at different rates, which causes the buckling. So a good way to prevent that is to wet both sides of your paper. You can also stretch your paper, but that is for another video. So if I add water to the back side here, what will happen is that it will slightly saturate and the buckling, see it's already starting to flatten out, will go away. But I don't need this to be soaking wet. You could also just run your paper very quickly under the sink if you don't want to brush on all your water. But you can see here that it is really starting to flatten out. Part of that is also because it's wet on my surface now, so it's almost acting like glue. So make sure that it's entirely saturated. I like to go over it with my fingers just to make sure that it is saturated. You can see any lighter portions of your paper are not saturated, but that's a good way to get your paper to lay flat. Now you can let this dry slightly before you begin painting, because if you keep it super wet, your paint's gonna shift around. So that's just one method. If you're doing a dry method, clearly you don't want to do that, and taping is your best option. Okay, so for my landscape here, I want to do a little bit of ground, and so I'm going to use, I'm only using warm tone colors for this. So I'm using reds, browns, yellows. I may add a little bit of cool blue to some of these browns just for like the stem, just to add a little bit of contrast to the orange. But for the most part, I'm using warm colors and maybe a cool brown. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with this, it's like a burnt sienna or a red brown. And I'm just going to do kind of a slanted hill, and this is where my tree is going to live. And it's pretty saturated, really pigmented, and I'm just doing some little streaks here. Then I'm gonna go in with this, it's like a yellow ochre or a sienna even, borderlines both. And I'm gonna fill in some of those gaps. Now I think I want it to be a little bit more sheer, so I'm gonna add some more water to my brush. Okay, so I have my colors laid down just ever so slightly on the bottom here. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of yellow. So I'm using this darker yellow. I have two. I have a light yellow, lemon yellow, and then I have this, it's almost like a school bus yellow here, marigold. And I'm just going to lighten some of these areas with a little bit of yellow. And you can let this dry and go back and forth with more color, but I think that is good for now. So now I'm going to go in with my smaller brush and I'm gonna wet it, and I'm gonna make leaves, but I'm not going to be making each individual leaf on a tree. I'm going to be doing what looks like an impression of a leaf. So it's going to all together look like it's leaves on a tree, but up close, you're gonna look at it and it's just gonna be little dots. So I'm gonna go in with I'm gonna go in with all of my warm colors essentially. So I'm gonna be going light yellow, my darker yellow, my kind of yellowy brown color here, a little bit of red, a little bit of brown, some orange. So I'm gonna do all my warm colors. So I'm gonna start with my light color here, my light yellow. And you want it to be really saturated, so not a lot of water on here. I just dipped my brush once. And what you're gonna do is you can take another paintbrush, or I'm not gonna use this one because it's wet. You can use your finger and tap, but I like to get a little bit more force behind it, so I'm gonna hit it with another object. Okay, so you're gonna grab your paint as much as you can there, and then you're just gonna tap. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna look like spray here of different colors, and you wanna stay centralized to your left-hand side, and you don't wanna go all over your painting because you're making just like a little blob of dots here, a little pointillism kind of painting. If you go over your whole page, you can make it look like your tree is sweeping, and you don't have to worry about any leaves that are like in between or on the ground because it's gonna look like the leaves are falling. So I'm just gonna keep going in with this color. And it does get a little bit messy, so protect your table. Okay, so I have my yellow down. Now I'm gonna go into some orange. And if you don't have all these colors, you're welcome to mix colors on a side palette. And you can go in with a bigger brush or a little brush as well. And if you use a bigger brush, I'll show you, it gives you bigger dots. So I have my big brush here, I'll show you some of those with my yellow. Here that it's a larger section, so you can do back and forth between bigger dots and smaller dots if you would like. I'm going to go in with some of this darker brown, this red brown. And you just want to build lots of contrast, because usually when leaves are turning color naturally, they're not all one solid color. There's usually golds, browns. You may even want to add some greens in here. I would stick to the warmer greens. So I have two greens here. I'll show you the difference. So this one leans more towards a yellow green, and this one is definitely more towards almost a teal even. It has quite a bit of blue in it, so this is our cooler green. Now all of these colors go nicely together. However, if you add this cool green color in there, you might see a dramatic shift in the mood that you're going for. So keep that in mind when you're adding cool colors to warm colors. Sometimes they can have a little bit of a weird value happening. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with a little bit of red. And I'm just saturating it just so it's kind of thick. I'm not adding a ton of water. I'll show you with your finger. It works just as good, so if you don't want it to be noisy, you can just tap on your brush. But I feel like I get more consistency here. It does a harder shake when I use a tool. If you have strong fingers, then maybe you won't have any issue there. And you just want to keep going over this until it's kind of saturated in the middle and then fades outwards. Going with some more yellow. And you want to go back and forth with the colors and not just do all your yellow, then all your brown, orange, because what will happen is that you'll see distinct layers of color, and usually trees, they kind of, you know, go back and forth between the colored leaves. When you look at one, you won't be able to distinctly pick out one specific color, unless it's like a ginkgo biloba, I cannot say that word, a ginkgo tree, where all their leaves are pretty much this golden yellow. So if you wanted that kind of tree, that could be pretty fun. And if you wanted to, instead of doing splatter, so maybe you don't want to make a big huge mess, because you can see it's clearly offspring. There's even some a little bit on my table. There's some on the backs of my hands. You can go in and just tap in some spaces with the tip of your brush, and that's totally fine. You can just build up by splotching. Now it is going to spread a little bit more, so your leaves are not going to be as distinct and sharp, but we're going to end up toning some of these down anyways. I'll show you that. So you can go in with your brush, but I definitely like the way that it looks when it's splattery. You could also just do this as low and close to your paper as possible, and do lighter but more frequent taps, and that'll make it so that it doesn't go as far. If you're going hard and fast, it's just gonna go everywhere, and that's okay with me. But if you're trying to protect your workspace a little bit more, that's a good way to do it. Going in with a little bit more light orange. I think it needs a little bit more yellow in there. I have a lot of reds, a lot of dark tones here, and then I even have my dark marigold color. I think it needs a little bit more lemon yellow. I think I want to do more lemon yellow around the outside of my circle that I'm creating here. So that it looks like the sunshine is actually penetrating the outside just a little bit more. Okay, so I have my tree here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in a trunk and some branches. So to do the trunk and the branches, it's a pretty simple process. You're going to use your smaller brush, as small as you can get it. And I'm going to mix a brown. So because I've already used this kind of red-brown here to do some of my leaves, I won't have very much contrast if I choose this for my trunk. And I'll show you that just so you can get an idea. I pulled my trunk down here, you see how it just really blends in. It looks orange. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a custom color. So I'm going to take some of this brown, I'm going to put it in a little palette. You can do this on your work surface, you can do it on a paper plate, you could do it on a traditional palette. This actually just comes with my paint kit here. It's like a little bubble. It's quite convenient. So I'm just making a little bit of brown, putting that in there, and then I'm going to add a little bit of blue. So when you mix two complementary colors together, so we talked about complementary colors being colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, so yellow and purple, red and green, blue and orange. Now I would say that this has a lot of orange undertones. As you can see here, it's very orange. So opposite the color wheel would be blue. So if I wanted to make brown, I would add the orange and the blue, and it's going to make brown. And because I'm adding the blue, it's going to make a cooler brown. So I'm going to add a little bit more of this blue. And I add add a little bit at a time and incorporate it because I don't want to go too far with it to where it's really blue. And so this is a nice chocolatey brown. You can test it on a piece of paper. Always test your colors, so you can test it there. It almost looks black on screen, but it is a nice, looks like, you know, milk chocolate there. So that's gonna give us a lot more contrast. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add a little bit of that orangey brown color here. Take a little bit of my chocolate brown. To make a lighter color so that I have two shades. I'm gonna have a light brown and then I'm gonna have my dark brown. So light brown, dark brown. And that's gonna make it so that I can make some shadows and highlights. All right, so I'm gonna put this out of my way. And I'm just going to follow the line that I made with that orange. And I want the almost roots to come out just a little bit here too. Do a few little lines that come up into the tree. Maybe there's another little branch that you can kind of see in there. And then I'm going to take my lighter brown. If you have these colors already pre-made in your palette, great. I did not have them, so I made my own. I'm going to take my light brown that we made, and I'm going to go along the right-hand side, sorry, left-hand side. And you can make your trunk as thick as you want. Do a little lighter root that comes out here too. And then because this is a tree, and trees, if you look underneath them, it's going to cause shadows. So for your ground here, you really want to make sure that there is a shadow underneath your tree. And the best way to do that is to go in with your light brown and just add a little bit of shadow in there. And it's going to look a little bit washed out. It's not going to be super crisp lines. So feel free to add some more water to your brush. Get right in there next to the roots. Because my branches are kind of coming out here, I'm imagining that the sun is casting the shadow. Feather out my edge so that it doesn't look as steep by just adding a little bit of water to my brush and blending out that edge. And you can darken it a little bit towards the center by just adding your dark brown. Now there's going to be leaves that come down and fall on the ground. I have a few little yellow ones here, but I'm going to add some more. And because I want them to stick out, I'm going to choose my red, because I don't have much red up in here, it's a little. And I'm going to choose my red down here so that when they've fallen, you could even do the dark brown, a little bit of that, and tap that on. Maybe there's some little texture there. I think that's cool. But I'm going to choose my red. And it's going to look like the leaves have fallen on the ground. Maybe it's a windy day and they're just blowing off. You could actually turn your paper so that the spray pattern kind of does that, where it looks like the leaves are blowing. That would be neat. A little bit of yellow. And that's it. that's a fun little fall tree landscape. You can do a variety of different things. You could spray it with water and make it a little bit more whimsical. You could add a blue background to the back before doing all this. You could just do a wash of color, or gray even. I like the white because I like a lot of contrast in my paintings. I'm going to move this just so you can see why it's important to protect your work surface. So keep that in mind. And with our little trick, we didn't get a lot of warping happening there, so that was great. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you try making a little landscape. You could add a little duck or something. Maybe there's pumpkins in there, so really use your imagination, some crows or something like that. Well, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.